All right, we're so excited to be here with you. And I just want to start off, we're going to introduce ourselves, but I just want to let you know that Ben and Penny here are geniuses, and you're going to learn so much from them. And so whenever you guys ask questions, I'm just going to point to them because they're amazing. They know so much. So I'm going to hand it off to Ben first, let him introduce himself, and then we'll start rolling.
Hi, my name is Ben Mankin. I own a systems integration firm in Nashville, Tennessee. We design, sell, and install audio-video systems. What else do you want to know? I grew up in Abilene, so coming to Dallas is like old home week. If you're not from Texas, if you've seen Friday Night Lights, we played them in football. Other than our crosstown rival, our closest away game was 250 miles. Penny Peavler, next.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Penny Peavler from the Weber Group in Louisville, Kentucky. We are a design-build firm. We work in a lot of immersive spaces, including environments of worship, but we also work in museums, zoos, amusement parks, water parks, housing, and we work with a lot of cities on brand development and bringing to the surface what is truly unique about brands and helping integrate that into the architectural building program and the spaces between buildings. So it's different than kind of an advertising kind of branding. We work with a lot of architects around the country in many different disciplines to try and bring to the surface spaces that are inviting, compelling, welcoming, and of human scale. Ben and I have something that we share besides having worked together on an immersive church project. We both were interns in the Disney management training program down in Orlando, Florida. So that's part of our great bond as well. And we're so glad to have Richard with us here today. And I'll let him tell you a little bit about himself.
My name is Richard Mosqueda. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and I was on staff at Southeast Christian Church for 12 years, where we started a college young adult service. It started with about 100 people that grew to about 1,600. And so we'll be showing you some of the pictures, some of the different things that we experienced during that journey. And now I am in a church plant in Louisville, Kentucky. So I'll hand it back over to Ben.
So, our intent is to talk about what is a compelling space and what that means to you. And so, on this first slide, we kind of created a couple icons. So you see, a mall or a shopping center, and you see a hot dog, and you see that's a cupcake, and then you see like a bad neon sign. And so the question is, what is compelling? How do you define that? And what we've talked about is compelling spaces utilize all three aspects of content, technology, and design. And design maybe is also intent or the way that the content and technology manifest itself. And the goal of those three things is to tell the story or narrative that engages your audience, that makes it compelling. So if you think about those icons that we had previously, those in itself are average or mediocre. But when you add the content or when you add the technology, it's not a cupcake anymore. It's Sprinkles with their own iPhone app and stores around the world. It's not a hot dog. It's the world-famous Pink's hot dog. It's not just a mall. It's an immersive experience. That happens to be the Comcast building. It's an immersive experience that people loiter outside because they can't get in, but they see this visual image of someone playing on the piano. So what does that mean to you? I'm assuming all of us here are church folks, whether you're full-time in a church or whether you're a volunteer. So how do you create a compelling space? How do you use that stuff and the raw materials to create a space that's engaging and that engages your audience? Penny?
Now, in our practice, we sometimes reference the work of a Dutch architect in the 1960s who said, whatever time and space mean, place and occasion mean more. And I think what Aldo van Eck was trying to say with that is this is a space, but what goes on in here is the part about creating place and occasion. So there are the relationships to the people who are in the room and their relationship to the environment. That's what creates the memory. And that's really what we're about in church work. We're about creating a space where relationships can happen, where exciting things can happen, and where the story, which is the basis of everything that we do, can reach the hearts and minds of our participants. So we want to remove the distractions, we want to let the relationship happen, and we want to provide content that's meaningful and engaging and relevant. So what might that look like? This is not something that we're here to tell you, well, this is what you need to do. What we're here to talk about is the process that you will go through to keep that story at the center of what you're doing. Keep those relationships at the center. So we're about creating place and occasion. Because when you talk about place and occasion, it means something special. It means something more than time and space. Now we're going to talk a little bit about branding for just a minute. And you might not think branding and consumerism and all the things that are wrapped up in that have anything to do with the church or have anything that we can take away and use in our practice and our daily work. But I challenge you to think about the personal story, the personal relationship that each and every person who visits, attend, is a part of the church, is a part of one of the church's outreach programs. What is the experience? And how is it different for your members, your congregants, your participants, your visitors, whatever you want to call them? What is your story? And if you're in a position of driving that vision, that overall brand, then we challenge you to think about that. What is your story? What makes our church different? What makes our church unique? Or what makes it like others? What moments are you creating for your congregation each and every time they have an interaction with you? If you asked your congregation what makes your church special, what would they say? What are the 5 words that somebody would use to describe your congregation? Now let's just holler out here. What are some words that if you asked the question of your congregation at home, what do you think they would use to describe your church? Anybody just help me out here. Family, okay. Honest preaching. Family and honest preaching. What else? Authenticity. Keeping it real. Traditional.
Awesome experience.
I'm sorry?
Awesome experience.
Awesome experience. So I'm going to feel awesome when I'm there. I'm going to feel moved. Anything else? Yes? Growing. It's exciting. People like to be a part of things that are growing. Now, if you ask everyone in your congregation that question, do you think they would all give the same answer? No. Do you think you could amalgamate 5 little answers that you could get everybody to give as kind of the elevator speech when they go out? No? Would you want to? Oh yeah, that was a good comment. That was a good comment. So I think these are the kinds of questions that we want you to, that we encourage you to ask yourself as you're creating new spaces, as you're creating new series, as you're creating environments. What makes your church special? What makes it different? What makes it unique? Why should anyone be a part of it? If you are clear about what your church is about your church's brand, we can borrow from consumerism a little bit and do something called eliminating redundancy in the marketplace. Now, I'm going to give you another consumeristic example here, and maybe there's nothing here that you can take away and use, and that's fine too, but I just want to raise the question for you. Has anybody ever had the experience of going into Abercrombie and Fitch? If you have young kids, you may have. What is different about buying pants there?
You want to get out so you can get rid of the smell.
As a parent, I'm with you. Yeah. If I was about 20 years younger, maybe. And it's very loud in there. Anything else? Is there anything else you notice about buying the pants there?
They cost a fortune.
They cost a fortune. They cost a fortune. But the experience of buying those pants is very different than buying the pants, let's say, at Macy's, even though they may be the very same pants. So in this example of consumerism, what Abercrombie & Fitch has done is they have created an environment in which you as a consumer will pay more for the pants to go in there and smell the stinky smell and hear the excruciatingly loud music. But they have used that to their advantage. They've targeted their audience, and they've made the decision, this is how we're going to charge more for our pants. They have eliminated any redundancy within their target of selling the pants by charging more and creating an experience. Now, we're not about selling stuff in the church world, but we are about fighting redundancy in the marketplace. We are about competition. We've put up here that you may want to consider that your competition is not about the church down the street. It's about sports teams, going to Starbucks and reading the New York Times, horseback riding lessons for your kids. Any other examples come to mind? What is a reason why someone would not choose to attend church on Sunday? Sleep, that could be a powerful one, even though we're only asking for a couple of hours of your week, and the payback is huge in personal dividends. But what are some of the common excuses we hear about why people don't attend church? Distance? Interesting. Hunting. Wow. Sunday is the preferred day for hunt, huh? Or Saturday night, or whenever it may be. So we encourage you to think about how you can differentiate yourself from all these other things that compete for people's time. Now, and we're not here to tell you what that looks like for you, but these are the things that we feel like the church of the future should be thinking about. How can church become a priority for people? If relationships are made there, if the space has the right human scale, if you go into a building and it just feels vacuous, it feels extreme, we're not sure where to go, we're not setting up a repeat visitation experience. Now let's talk about Starbucks for a minute. What lessons might we be able to learn from Starbucks? How does Starbucks resonate with you? What's the experience of going into Starbucks? It's got a cool vibe. Okay. Warm. Colors are warm, definitely. Is the coffee good? Yeah, the coffee's good, so the product is still good. That's important. Some compelling spaces may lose sight of the product. And in our case, we don't want to lose sight of the message. We don't want to lose sight of the content. I mean, you can have all kinds of gimmicks, and if the content's not king, then the message is not going to get through. What else about Starbucks?
Has an integrated theme.
Has what?
Has an integrated theme.
Has an integrated theme. So the whole experience, the baristas that work there, they care about what they're serving you. They're knowledgeable about their product. What else?
Customer service.
Customer service? Definitely. Any ideas about what we could learn from that about church?
Yeah, it's the third place. It's where we go to hang out. You got work, home. It's that third place where you go to meet friends.
Third place, to meet friends, the place to be. And the other thing that's interesting, I think, about Starbucks is that anywhere you travel in the world and you go into a Starbucks, you're going to pick up some of those same feelings at your local Starbucks that's just down the street. So there's a consistency there in that brand every week, every interaction, anywhere you are that's consistent. Now, we all know that within the greatest story ever told, we have that consistency, right? We have the message of love, we have the message of Jesus, we have the message of neighbors as ourselves. But how can we take that and spin that into the appropriate brand application of Starbucks for the church environment? I'm not here to say church should be like Starbucks. It's not about always being comfortable. But it is about getting rid of any distraction so that the message can shine through.
Real quick, Penny,
Yes.
in the two examples, just to be clear, Abercrombie & Fitch does not sell pants. They sell emotion. That's what you're buying. And Starbucks does not sell coffee. They're selling community. And you're happy to buy into community for $4. When you buy Tide, you're not buying a detergent. You're buying empowerment. Look, if I use Tide, I get like so much more time, and it gets my clothes clean. So what is it at your church? And if you notice, when Penny said, what are the definitions of your church? Nobody in here said Jesus. Because that's assumed. You're not differentiating yourself from anybody else if you say Jesus. The megaphone guy on the street says he loves Jesus, but that's not really his core differentiation. His differentiation is the megaphone. So what's yours? Is it the Harley Davidson ministry, or is it the incredible singles ministry, or is it the fact that you meet in a barn? Or, Penny's church, the one that she attends, they actually have a farmer's market. Their church is known for a farmer's market.
The #1 farmers market in the state of Kentucky. I invite you all to come and visit. We were not the #1 farmers market in the country, but we did vie for that title. So what we want you to think about today and take away is, if you are going to create a new space, if you're going to revise the space that you have, if you're going to create an overall experience for your visitors, for your congregants, for your members, for your guests, what is your story and what makes your church special? Because that's the only way that we can grow in this overcommitted, no time, sleep, hunting, sports, horseback riding world. Our job is to create differentiation and get out there and sell it. And so we want you to go away and think about what that may mean for you. Now, one of the tools that we use in our practice is the brand narrative. And what we do is we actually sit down and we write the story in words that we're going to tell. What are the emotions that we want people to feel? What do we want the takeaways to be? And we tell that story in words and pictures. We have some photo references you can see there. We have some graphics. And when we roll out, let's say, a new concept, and this one is for the Great American Adventure Hotel, which is in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. It's a project that hasn't been built, like many projects in today's world. But the developer came to us and they said, okay, well, we want to build a family hotel here in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. So we look at the story of Valley Forge and we think, what was that about? Death, destruction, people freezing to death. What's the story here? And as we began to talk with our client and as we began to dialogue about it, what came out of that is actually from struggle and adventure comes greatness, comes strength, comes our amazing nation. So the story of our hotel then became about all these amazing places in America and how they could be celebrated there at the birthplace of one of the greatest battles, for the nation. And so we began to celebrate with a restaurant that was emblematic of the great bagel shops of New York. This has nothing to do with your ministry, but it's just a tool. It's a tool. And we encourage you to write a brand narrative for your church. What is our church about? Illustrate that for people so that everybody is dancing the same ballet. Everybody knows what we're about here. Churches can always be about something for everybody, but we need to have some core tenets that we all agree on so that we're all marching toward the same goal. And we encourage you to write that brand narrative, illustrate it with pictures.
And the danger is if you don't, then you don't have guardrails to know when to say no. So if I come to you and say, hey, I have a great idea for a ministry, what we should totally do is go to Bangladesh and we should operate a factory there and it should be the cleanest factory ever and then we can sell Kathy Lee Gifford clothing and blah, blah, blah. And if you don't have this, if you don't have a guardrail, you will say, oh, because you use the word Jesus, that's totally within our mission. When really it's not. It's not in your mission. Just like the church I attend, no one speaks Spanish. So if I were to come up and say, we should totally have a dynamic Spanish ministry, well, that's not going to work. But only if you have the guardrail that say, hey, we are really good with English speakers. And we don't speak Mandarin, and we don't speak Spanish, and so those just aren't our ministries right now. And if you really, really want a Spanish ministry, or if you really, really want a Mandarin ministry, you can come to our office anytime. You can use our resources to help you find a church that can partner with your personal ministry. Because it's not us. Because our brand is, or the people we're trying to reach are X. Question?
How does it differ from the church's mission statement is the question. I would say that it is more of a detailed explanation of the mission and vision. The mission statement might be a short, concise statement. Your vision is, these are ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. And it's going to be embodied in this way. It is a bit like a mission statement, but it's more explanative. Here I've shown you some examples of places to be. Now, none of these are church examples. This is Disney World up here with the hammock. This is just a place in a resort environment for people to linger longer. Are you creating those spaces within your church for people to linger? Are you creating places for conversations to happen? That third place doesn't have to be the cafe, okay? It doesn't have to be. I mean, food is great, and coffee is great, and particularly coffee that supports a mission and that's about, has sustainable practices of farming and that kind of thing. That's great. But do we have comfortable places for people to linger and for conversations to happen? Is our building of human scale? If we have a huge hub-and-spoke building where we welcome thousands of people every weekend, that's awesome. But as we spoke off from our hub, does the scale come down to human scale? That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're all trying to do, because that's the space where the relationship can happen. That's the space where the message can get through. And so you can do that with your built environment.
Penny, let me jump in real quick.
Yeah.
You had a question about mission, because obviously the mission is to reach all people. I mean, we don't ever get to the point in church of like, sorry, we're not really trying to reach out to you. But I think what we're saying is that there's a lot of churches out there. And what happens is when a church starts, a lot of times they start with a certain mission. We're going to be all about, our focus is going to be about children's ministry. Our focus is going to be, they get focused on one thing. The church gets started with the focus. And then all of a sudden someone comes along and says, wouldn't it be great if we did this? Wouldn't it be great if we did this? Wouldn't it be great if we did this? And so what happens is we lose the focus of our ministry, which we were designed and started to do one thing. And so really what that goes back to is we want to include everybody, but you're not going to be good at everything. So you have to figure out what you're going to be good at. And that's what Penny is really talking about is because if you're not, then you're going to be just like every other church that's trying to do everything, and then there's no difference. So I'll let you get back to.
Yeah. No, I think that's. Any other questions along those lines? Yes.
In our church, we don't feed the people that don't have any food. So what we do is, we know this church that they do that. So every year we send an offering, very good offering to them so they can do it.
So I want to repeat that back to make. I'm going to take let's see if the microphone will reach, because we're recording this session. Now, if I suddenly bring the podium down, I do apologize in advance. Repeat that for us.
No, I was saying, like, for instance, our church, we don't feed the people that don't have any food, but there are other ministries around us that they do that. So what we do is every year we send an offering to them so they can keep doing it.
So they can keep doing it. So
exactly.
You can't offer that.
Yeah, so that's how we feel part of it.
And see, that's genius, because really what it comes down to is every church feels like they should be able to do everything because a church member wants something done, that they should be the church that can do everything, which realistically we can't. And it's great if you partner up and kind of break down the church walls. And they're like, a lot of times we go, okay, here's our church, here's what we do, and we don't associate with other people, but we can team up with other churches and see what strengths other churches have.
Let's talk a little bit. I'm blitzing out here on our segue, but I want Ben to talk a little bit about the technology and how that interfaces with the environment to create the compelling experience for visitors.
Do you want me to work through this case study, or what are you thinking?
No, I was just thinking about, we've talked a lot about the space.
We have specifically technology. I think our position would be technology is just a tool, one of the many tools, and it can reinforce your content. It can reinforce your space. So what I would encourage you to do, if you want homework, it would be find places that people loiter and take notes of what they do technologically. So if you go to the AMC theaters, they have speakers in the parking lot. They're creating an atmosphere and mood that's very inexpensive, right? It's just a speaker in a parking lot. But they're creating the brand awareness before you even get to the front door. If you loiter at Target, I mean, or Costco or Sam's, the reason that they use, or a better example is Whole Foods. Did you know that Whole Foods has a different light that's a different color temperature just on produce? Because it makes it look more appealing. That has everything to do with intent and nothing to do with technology. They're going to put lights in anyway, right? They got to light up the produce stand. But the fact that they use a different color temperature makes it more appealing. Target, they're not benevolent at Target. They're evil capitalists, right? Yeah. So, there is a specific reason that they have those little, scanny things that, all over the store. Oh, wonder how much this costs. Scan. Well, what's the takeaway for you? Is that maybe you need better wayfinding or better signage in locations because people can't find what they want. There's a church here in Dallas that I visited recently, and when you stand in one location, you can see 5 different typefaces. This hall has a different typeface. That kids ministry has a different typeface. And if you stood at any one of those locations, you would think that it's fine. But there is a point where when you stand in the hub and you see all those typefaces, you actually think, I don't think anybody here is creating a holistic approach to the guest experience. It looks like it's just added on en masse. Or, I'm a video guy, so I have a video background. If you have 4:3 aspect ratio screens right now, you are telling your audience that you are irrelevant. You can't buy a 4:3 screen at Walmart. They don't exist. And so you're saying, hey, we invested heavily in technology, or we invested in your guest experience 20 years ago. Right? You're using the same technology that was developed in the 50s.
So what can we learn from this to bring people back to our facilities? Clearly, people are going back to Abercrombie to buy their overpriced, ripped, stinky pants. Clearly, people are going all over the world to seek out Starbucks to get their cup of coffee that's going to make it, just the way they want. What kind of memory making are we doing in our churches? What kind of things are we doing to get people back? What is our brand? What is the story we're telling? Richard?
Okay, we've talked about the environment. We've also talked about the equipment. But we also said that if you have a really nice building and it looks sharp and you have great equipment, top-of-the-line equipment, and you have people there and yet the content isn't good, then what's the point of all the environment? What's the point of the equipment? So I'm going to take you through about 5 points on content. And one of the first ones we have is intentional programming. And programming, actually, let me follow up here with the slides here. Okay, intentional programming. And programming has become this word in churches. It's kind of like the word love. I love pizza, I love my wife, I love my dog. It has different meanings for every different person, And so programming for some people means a difference, like so many different things. Like programming for some people is like picking out some worship songs and having a speaker. But that's not programming. Programming is putting a worship service together. It's thinking through transitions. It's thinking through how are you going to program this where you're going to create an experience. And so the whole goal for intentional programming is to take people on a journey. So are you in the habit of trying to think through your service as taking people through a journey from beginning to end? Second one we want to talk about is atmosphere. And by the way, I want you guys to have a mic too, so you guys can jump in on some of this stuff. How are the people in the back? You guys doing okay? Staying up back there? All right. You guys are troopers. All right. Second one is atmosphere, especially because you guys can jump in on this one. Here's what there's been movements before where people say, people just want to come to church and they don't really want to know much about God. They're just kind of checking it out. I disagree. I think people come to church to find God. And they come to church to find God and they want to experience Him. That's why they're there. And so many times we're afraid to let them know. We're like, we just want you in the church. No, we want them to experience God, and it's our job to do that. It's for them to have that experience. And the experience starts when they pull into the parking lot, not just when the program starts. Because so many times we think, okay, the program starts now. No, it started when they pulled in the parking lot. Ben was talking about that with movie theaters with the speakers. Anything you guys want to say about that with the parking lot?
Well, I think the parking lot ministry can be one of the most powerful ministries for volunteers to work in. Ben talked about the signage.
I have an example from this week. We have a parking lot. We have a greeting team. They're waving. Welcome to campus type of thing. And 2 weeks ago, somebody complained, and they said, "Hey, have a lot of kids out, and so we really need to slow people down." That makes sense, right? Kids, slow down, right? Well, what happened? What happened is instead of the greeters, right, the parking lot team waving, now when you come to campus, they give you a stern look and say, as a guest, that really doesn't want me to get out of the car. And so in other words, in the A decision, right, from a guest would be if you have a happy police officer who's saying, "Come on in," and then you have members who are saying, "No, slow down." That's a mixed message. It would be easier, better, cheaper to actually deliver the slowdown in a passive way. Speed bump. And then you still have a happy greeter. Welcome. So my ideology, I don't work for a church, but if I had the Church of Ben, then my ideology would be that the only person to tell you that you're wrong and living in sin is the pastor. And everybody to that point should be welcoming regardless of who you are. Welcome to campus. So glad you're here. Oh, would you like a seat? No problem. Oh, you have kids. Oh, can I help you find a kids classroom? Instead of, slow down. Oh, you have kids? Oh, I think we're kind of full today. Right? I mean, there's a church that we visited. We went on a 2-year, my wife and I, we went on a 2-year journey to find a church. And one church we went to, we stopped going to because, on week 3 we were there, they said, we dropped off our 2-year-old, and they said, "Oh, we're a little understaffed today. Can you just stay and hang out here?" No. In fact, I'll take my kid back, thank you. Because if you're doing that with guests, people you've never met, that is crazy. Can we agree that that's crazy?
Atmosphere is number 2, and we're talking about... I want to give you a few examples. Something that we did at the Vine, which is a service that I talked about earlier, is we would have our worship area set up, and this is an example. It's kind of, you can't really see. This is a couple of pictures from the way our stage was set up. But one of the things that we did before we got, this is the worship area. But before you got into the worship area, we had an atrium where people were walking in. And if we had a theme, we would always theme out the atrium. And so as people were walking in, they would already know what they're going to be talking about. So you got a bulletin, and you got to see, we did one called, talked about identity. And in the atrium, we put fun mirrors. We got these fun mirrors when you're walking and you're got really tall or you got really short or, it stretched you out. And as we were walking through, people were like, people were like, come by this one, come by this one. So everyone's out there having fun. And then we walked into the worship area and talked about identity. What's our identity in Christ? Another one we did is we did the story of Jonah. And what we did is we had communion stations all around the room. And then we had goldfish. And that we put because it was all about...
Live goldfish.
Yes. None were swallowed. Don't worry. During the whole thing. But we put them all over the place. And one of the things with the goldfish is it became this thing where people were taking them home and they became pets. And I mean, there was like, and part of it was because we were trying to create the atmosphere and we were trying to create an experience of what was going on. And so we always set up different things. Atmosphere sets the tone for your feel. For example, if you want intimate, darker atmosphere usually gives people more freedom to worship. I don't know why. But it's funny how if you have the lights turned up really bright and people are kind of looking around, you turn them down a little bit and people have a little bit more freedom. One of the things that for atmosphere that I would, I'm a big believer in the small room feel. Okay, this feels really nice and tight today. But I have gotten calls from other churches, and then they'll call and say, "Hey, our church feels cold. Will you come and talk to us about how to make it feel warmer, how to make it feel more intimate?" And a lot of it is, I just want to tell them on the phone, you don't need me to come out to your church. You just need to make it a small room feel. Because nobody wants to walk into a room and there's like seats for 1,000 people and there's 100 people there. Because you walk in, the first thing you say is, wow, no one's here. Why am I here? You know, that's the first thing that comes to your mind. And you walk into a room that's full and you're like, I'm glad I'm here. You know, and so our goal is to make the room feel small. We used to, when we first started, I told you that we started with about 100 college-age students. And we used pipe and drape. Doesn't look the best, but it worked for us. And we had a room that probably sat about 700 people. And so we used pipe and drape to block off the room. And I remember one night particularly, we had some volunteers, and they were like coming up to me and they go, "Richard, it's crazy. We're packed." We only had 200 people there. It wasn't that many people, but the reason it was the reason they were so excited is because we had to move the pipe and drape back. And it was just amazing how every time we moved the pipe and drape, we had an excitement with the volunteers, and the people felt it. There was an energy in the room. So one of the things that you want to do is try to make your room feel small. And that's the next one that we want to talk about. Number 3 is one service, one message. How many of you in here are programmers? Like you program worship, you do church stuff, and you're like in charge of sermons or worship, or okay, about 4 of you guys? Okay, more of you. Okay, more than. All right, one of the things I would suggest to you is this one is so important. One service, one message. At the Vine, one of the things that we always did is we had a sermon, and we always wanted to say that we intentionally programmed the worship, the videos, discussion questions, anything we had, the sermon, all led to one message. And if I did my job as a speaker, was you were to walk out of there and you knew exactly what you're supposed to do. And so the whole service was built for that one thing. And you walked out of there and you said, I need to start doing this, I need to stop doing this, or I need to change this. You knew exactly what that was. And if you didn't know that, then either the speaker didn't do a good job or we didn't do a good job programming. And one of the things that a lot of us forget about is that every song that you sing, it's a sermon. And so there's certain times where you are throwing all kinds of different messages up there. And each song has its own life. There's new songs, there's favorite songs, there's songs that you've been playing too much. And worship must be driving. Are you taking people somewhere? You know, you got to take them somewhere. And here's one of my pet peeves. And it happens everywhere in a lot of churches. The worship leader will get up and do his thing, and it's great worship. And then the speaker will come up and do something totally different. You had 2 different messages. And people walk out and go, that was great worship. Or people go walk out and go, that was a great message. But it doesn't flow. And there's an amazing thing that will happen when it all just flows together and everyone knows exactly what they were supposed to do and you're led in worship. And I think a lot of that happens is because the tech, whoever's in charge of tech and the pastor are disconnected. They don't spend time together going, here's where I want to take this message, and we want to program it all to that. And so I think there's a lot of meetings that need to take place. Number 4, and I'm going to need you guys on this one, is from spectator to participant. This is one where it is really important as well, is try to get people to participate. One of the things that we did at our church is we'd break people up in prayer groups. And we'd just get in groups of 3 or 4. Don't worry, we're not going to do this today. You guys kind of looked at me like, don't you dare do this to me. And we're not doing that. But we had a lot of crowd participation. We had creative sermon series. Like we did a series called Games We Play. And in the games we play, is we pretty much just took, I asked some college students, what are some of the games that people are playing nowadays? And so, we had the constant Monopoly. This series is a little bit old by now, but we did Life, we did Taboo, and we did Jenga. And for Taboo, what we actually did is we had about 1,500 people, and we actually played it from the stage when it was time for the sermon. And so I got some volunteers, and I said, all right, you got this side, and then you got this side. And we actually played the whole game, and people were like, that was awesome. That was a great game. And then what I did is I took a tablet, and my sermon was off a Taboo card. I wrote Christian at the top, and I said, here's the 5 words you wouldn't be able to say if this was the game. And then we just that was what the message was. And at the very end of that, 5 weeks of the series, we bought a bunch of Jenga blocks, and we set them up all around the room, and we said each one of the messages had like an action point to it. And so we had everyone get a Sharpie and write down the one thing that really jumped out to them in this series, and they took that block home with them and said, put it on your dresser. And a way for them to remember. And that was a twofold thing, because next time someone played Jenga, or next time someone played Monopoly, I wanted them to remember, I remember that series we did. I remember that every time they'd see that block, that would be a reminder for them of different things that took place. Anything you guys want to jump in?
Yeah, I probably have a comment just there. And if you're seeing this set up real quick, Penny and I, we're all about the compelling environment, right? So I'm a technology guy. I admit it. And so I think my ideology is, if people are going to reject the message of Jesus Christ, let them do it on its face, not because they can't see it or hear it. That's why you spend money on gear. Penny, she believes that you should have a compelling environment that people want to go. And if you see how this class is set up, Richard, once we've done our job, then Richard or your pastor can create a compelling moment. We've set him up for success.
Yeah, if you can't find the room, which we were very worried about today, that when we got here, there were no lights on in the hallway here. And I walked by the room twice, and knowing what the room number was, by the way, before I could find it. If that's happening at church, if you don't have wayfinding, if you don't have places for people to gather, then, all is lost. You can have a compelling message, but if the space isn't set up such that can happen, then it may not happen.
One of the things we're talking about, the spectator to participant, is, and I'm not claiming this idea. This is a Louis Giglio who is amazing, but he had this concept in a sermon once. But he talked about Krispy Kreme donuts. Any fans of Krispy Kreme donuts here? Okay, some of you guys are going, really, in the morning you're telling me about that? Okay, well, he had this sermon where he talked about Krispy Kreme donuts, and he started eating one in the middle of his talk. Okay, and so I was like, I have to do this too. So I got a donut, and I was eating it from the stage, and people looked at me like I was cruel because I was eating it in front of them, and I ate the whole thing. I didn't realize you couldn't talk after you ate a donut. But so we did this whole thing, and then the verse to go with it was Psalms 34:8, taste and see that the Lord is good. I'm just throwing off the top of my head. I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's in there. I'll have to look at it later, but it's pretty close to that. But we talked about that, and it was the whole thing about experiencing God. That the whole analogy was a Krispy Kreme donut. I could tell you all about it, but until you go and eat it, you don't know what it tastes like. And it's the same thing with God, is that I could tell you all about God, but you have to experience God. And so we did that. We talked about that. And then afterwards, we brought in like 75 boxes of Krispy Kreme donuts. And that was just another way to reinforce what you're trying to teach. And so if you understand what we're trying to do is, we said, hey, it starts in the parking lot, and then it goes in the whole service through every song. It's one message, but then there's stuff even afterwards where you're trying to create this whole story for them. And I believe that church shouldn't be boring. It should be a celebration of God's goodness. And so many times we get church to be this thing where we're like, let's throw some songs together. Let's do the sermon. But we need to put effort into it to make it this experience people want to come back to. While we have this amazing atmosphere, we have great equipment, and we have the best story ever told. And so we need to put some effort into it. This next one, number 5, is create a culture of excellence. And actually, there's some pictures. Okay, and this is, for the sake of time, we're going to talk about this one, and then we'll open up for questions here in a little bit. But this was a really important one, create a culture of excellence. And I'll let you guys go ahead and start off with this one because you guys want to talk about it.
Whatever you do, do it well. Do less and do it well.
I got nothing.
Okay. This is an important one, create a culture of excellence. And here's one of the things I would suggest to you. You can have a level of excellence, but if your volunteers don't have a level of excellence, then it doesn't really matter. So your job is going to be, how can you get your level of excellence passed on to the people that are running the cameras, the people that are greeting, as Ben said? How can you get everybody on the same page? And one of the things that you have to do is, it has to be excellence, but you also have to give them freedom to take risk. We have our volunteers at the Vine. They had ownership of the program. For example, we had volunteers that would show up at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. We had an evening service, and they would stay until 9 o'clock. We had about 75 people that would do this, work 8 to 9 hours. And during the week, they'd be emailing me, what if we did this? What if we did this? Because they felt like that was their job in a sense. That was their ministry. They had ownership of it. And were you going to say something? Go ahead.
Speaking of excellence, or what brand awareness, or telling your story to all your volunteers and staff. So I attended a new church 2 years ago, and I'm trying to get my feet wet, thinking, okay, this might be the church for me. And they have, it's like Volunteer Sunday, where they want you to go out in the lobby and pick a ministry that you can volunteer at. Well, being a guest, right, and only being there 6 weeks, I don't want to volunteer. I don't want to get locked in. So I'm looking for the one activity that I can do with very little risk, very little time, and very little commitment. Coffee team. Sweet, right? All you have to do is show up early and hit go. Yeah? So I show up and I say, hey, my name's Ben, and, I'm trying to plug in, and I'm thinking about, being on the coffee team, so where do I sign up? And the volunteer looks at me and goes, Are you married? Because it's really easier with 2 people. What does that matter? In other words, you should be able to say, oh, man, we're so glad to have you. The coffee pot's kind of heavy. Now, can you carry it? Or, do you have, do you got a buddy? Or if not, we can partner you with. So I think that's where we were saying, if the story of your church is that you're going to have coffee every week, then there shouldn't be anything prohibiting anybody from volunteering at the coffee ministry.
And this is so important for us to get our volunteers on the same page. As I said, they should feel like they can take risk and they have fun doing it. For example, the reason I have this picture here is because that is our baptistry. And one of our volunteers said, man, it's hard to see the people getting baptized. So he put those lights, he installed those lights, and then it changed the whole experience. And it made it so much better. This is also the same volunteer that when we had Chris Tomlin come to the Vine, he decided, we built these towers, and he said, I had this idea, and he just drew it out on paper, and then he had 4 strands of park hands, and each one had probably about 10 lights or so. Is that right, Shane? About 10 park hands on each one, and four levels of this. And so we're in the middle of the Chris Tomlin, and when it was the hot spot in the worship, whatever, he would hit this button, 40 lights would come on. It was pretty intense. It was crazy. And this design was all because this volunteer said, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? I didn't do a single thing. He came up with it. He got a team together, and we built this whole stage set. And one of the things that was neat was that Christmas, he got that picture and framed it and gave it to me, and it's up on my wall. And it's a good reminder for me saying, it's all about the volunteers. It's all about them getting ownership, because you're only one person, and you can only do so much. But you're the one that drives the level of excellence that will take place in your ministry.
All right, well, we can go on for hours. We really can. We do this offline. I mean, we like each other. So, we chat up. But this class is for you. So, some feedback here would be great. Do you have any questions, or do you have an application, or do you have a comment, or how can we help? How can we help serve you? Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of this, in my mind anyway, sort of speaks to a contemporary style of worship. I was going to say a lot of my takeaway at the moment is this is more relevant to contemporary worship services and that sort of thing. Have you got any thoughts as to how to break in a more traditional congregation gently, or anybody in the audience here has tried this with traditional people and lessons learned from that?
Traditional can become still compelling. I think that would be my takeaway. In other words, if you're going to be traditional, embrace the traditional. In other words, how can you make traditional so compelling that people still want to attend? How can you exploit the traditional? So if you don't have stained glass windows, then how can you put up pictures of stained glass windows? Or if you,
You can also look at the pacing of the service. Even if it's traditional, a lot of contemporary worship is so programmed so that it appears that it's not programmed. I've been in some worship environments where, there's a timer on the back wall, just as if we were at a concert or something, But in a traditional worship environment, you can still look at your pacing and your timing so that your transitions are smooth.
I would say, back to the traditional, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I would say that traditional or any style, there is a difference between compelling and mediocre. So if you're going to have an organ, go big or go home, right? Me, personally, I don't care about listening to Joy to the World at all without a trumpet. It doesn't make sense to me without one.
You can still have good coffee, too.
All right, more questions? All right, coming to you.
So the thing about excellence is a double-edged sword, in my opinion.
It is.
Because you can go so far the other way that you lose what God wants to drop on your particular service any given Sunday.
Yes.
So I think you have to be very careful on, because that's a fine line that you have to walk, that thing of excellence.
It's very well said.
The other thing is the volunteers. So you can have a plethora of volunteers that have great hearts, but have no technical savvy to them at all. And so you're banging your head against the wall on trying to get your volunteers to where you are, and you're finding that you're totally falling short all the time. So my question is, if God has not gifted somebody in that area, and you're trying to train them, how do you, in your particular situation, you found somebody, or God dropped somebody in your lap that was talented in that area to be able to creatively think about lights and move in that. What do you do in a situation where you're working with a pool of people that just don't have it?
That is a great question. I'm happy to, if Richard wants to say a few words, but I'll tell you from our standpoint, when we design technical systems, one of the questions we ask is, what is your overarching ideology with tech systems? Because I can make a bulletproof tech system with zero human input. It's called Disney. It's called show control. You just hit a button 800 times during your show. If you think that's a win, I can do that. But if you think the win is to engage 12 people in ministry that would typically not come to church just because they're gear guys, well, then the trade-off is it may not be perfect. It may not be excellent. We're all humans. The camera 2 guy may actually have gotten a divorce this week. And the win is not that he had a perfect camera shot. The win is he actually came to church this week, and we got to hang out with him for 6 hours. If that's the win, then it trumps the perfection or excellence quotient. Is that fair?
And that's one of the reasons I said willing to take risks, because in our group, we got to a point where we would invest in somebody, we would train them, and they would just say, all right, go for it, and they would mess up. But we were still making the effort because we were trying to instill the excellence, and they knew what the line was where they needed to be. They didn't always get there, but we gave them time to get there. So it's one of those things where you don't always have. One of the things that we did probably better through the Vine was we kind of created a culture of people who were always bringing up the next group. And so they started in junior high for us, and then we just kind of kept building, and you start to get that, but it takes time.
Well, and strive.
Yeah.
And strive for excellence may be a better way to say that, because you know what that looks like.
We got a couple
and you're on the
things
path to get there.
Yeah, only a couple more minutes. We have some door prizes and some giveaways, so hang on real quick. Alan, go.
Is there... Oh, here, let me give this one.
Suppose we can't hire you to come in and help us brand a church. What can we do in a process by which helping a church determine what their branding is?
I do have a survey that I can share with you that you can set up for free on SurveyMonkey that are some questions that we ask. And we've asked our own employees and customers about our own company. Just some questions that you can ask to get the conversation going. You might see how the answers to those questions differ from your mission or from the vision that you've established. Just by asking people what they think is special, you may get a different answer than you expected, or you might get the same answer, which would be great. But I'd be happy to share that with you if you want to leave me a card. I'm happy to send that to you, and you can start that conversation and just look at the aggregate of all the responses you get. Don't.
One more quick question.
Yeah. We have a 55-year-old church, so we have folks that are in their 80s and even 90s, all the way down to tiny little babies. And can you create a space that's contiguous and still functions for all the different things that those people like, those different people groups? Because it's a lot of different age groups.
Yes, you can. But you do need to find some commonality. Each of those spaces can have its own differentiation, but you need to define what are going to be the common threads. Excuse me. That you can tie together. You might want to tie it together with color, or with, like Ben said, with the font, or with what you're going to do with the lighting, or there are a lot of different tricks. In that case, there are some tricks that you can use so that you'll get the same feeling with a different embodiment. So, and many great space planners can help.
I promise somebody in the back a question. Oh, who was it? Yes, go.
Right. As a baseline would be perhaps not so much ask the people in your congregation, but ask people not affiliated with your congregation and your community.
Oh, I agree.
And you'll get the real scoop on what your church's brand is.
If you can learn anything here, certainly, we have business cards, and I'm happy to give you my card. But the most important business card you can get is the guy next to you. And it's the common shared knowledge. What do we do? What am I doing? And same way with your team. If you can build a team of, one of the things that I tried at my church probably 6 years ago at this point is I invited everybody who had anything to do with technology, marketing, media, advertising, anybody, right? Record label execs, everybody, the whole industry. I invited them for a free breakfast, and we just said, hey, what do you guys want to do? I had 50 people. What do you guys want to do? You attend, all the problems that we have, all the strengths. What do you want to do this year? And 12 people said, I think our website's up, so we want to do it. Okay, website. If you can get 12 people engaged to build a website, great. That's not what I wanted to do, but hey, we engaged them in ministry.
And I just wanted to add one thing to what you said about brand. There are really three audiences that you want to look at. And I think you want to start with, obviously, your core audience, but you also want to look at people who should be attending that aren't. Let's say they're geographically close or they have some other tie. And third is to try to gather observational research or surveys from people who are disinclined to visit. They're either disinclined to visit church. What are the reasons why? Because you might learn something there that you can use to make a change.
Okay, thank you so much for coming. Let me show a couple housekeeping things. One, class evaluation. Apparently you can scan this whole thing if you have a smartphone. I have no idea what that means, but you can try. If you are like me and need paper, they're right here. Okay, next. We also have case studies of a church that we worked at. These are free. You can take those. We have some pictures. Awesome. And here's my friend Shane Skaggs, and he has a giveaway. So if you have a business card and you want to give it to Shane, he will give you a jump drive with tons of content.
Yeah, it has 15 different sermon series that have countdown videos, a postcard graphic,
I think we have like 50 or 60 jump drives. If we run out, just give me your card and I can send you on the mail. Thank you so much for coming.